Welcome to Happy Monday, everybody. Today, I'm going to go back to the original style of recording that I did a couple weeks ago. So I'm sharing my screen with you guys, and just one sec. Yeah, I think we're okay. So yeah, I'm going back to the original style of recording. We'll see how it goes today. Hopefully Microsoft Teams records it well. Today I'm pretty excited. So off our website, off our class website, why I'm excited is I really enjoy teaching this section we're going to go today because it is essentially some programming extras, some extra stuff that I think is a little more exciting, a little more interesting maybe than some of the core content of looping and stuff like that. So everything we're doing today is as it would be if we were in class and school wasn't closed, what I would call extras. It's not something that would have been required in this course, not something that if you take Computer Science 30S would be kind of something that I assumed you learned. But what it is it usually is a prep or a setup for the stuff that students do with final projects. So that's the idea, is that this stuff will set you up for looking at the final project. Last week, we finished the looping unit. So the looping unit was completed, and we completed the fourth and final looping assignment. The video for last week was actually, now that I'm just going to stop sharing for one sec, reshare, include system audio. There we go. Sorry, there's a setting in Teams I had to make sure was up and running. Yeah, what I meant is last week's video, when originally posted, had some issues with it. It was choppy, didn't quite work right. So I re-recorded it. Hello, everybody. And it should now have all the, they get up and up and up and up. You can see here, hopefully, including any capital R's, any how to do the rocket racing game. And for those of you who are doing the alternative assignment, because you can't use Visual Studio. Then determining a winner is basically the same code. Is also in there as well. So all of that code is in there, and you can go through that video and find the spots you need to help complete that final assessment if necessary. And so if I go back to where I started doing the online classes, back in week 8, back at the beginning of April, okay, that first video of that online class, okay, went over the variables part 1 unit. So from variables part 1 all the way through variables, conditional statements, and finally looping, over the course of this school closure, you should have ways that you could do the assessments, whether in class or outside of class, whether doing it on Visual Studio or doing it through the alternative website. Those are there for you. What today I want to go over again is those programming extras. There is not something for students doing alternative assignments for this portion of the content. So I just wanted to make that note. And what we're talking about now is preparing as well for the final course assessment, sometimes called the final project. Now, if you are not going to be doing a final project in the normal way, which is fine, it's not like it affects your mark in any way, but for those of you who want to, do some programming, do a final project, of course, my marking is going to be adapted to what the situation we're in. But another alternative, I just want to show in the document I made for students who have no access to a computer over the school closure. Like a lot of teachers, I made a booklet of printed materials for learning computer science where you could read from the booklet and then do questions. But I want to take it to the very last page of this booklet, because just to point out a couple things. For those students who had no access to a computer at all, no computer, okay? This would describe an alternative way to do a final assessment for this course. And this is open to anyone who essentially asks me. So if you'd like to do a final assessment in a different way, I'm open to that. You don't have to program a final assessment, especially if you find your home situation isn't working well for you, or if you have a Mac computer and whatever system. I'm essentially asking you to summarize or just write about what you've learned. So it's as basic as it can get, which is to just say to me, here's what I learned in Computer Science 20S, okay? As it says here, I'm not an English teacher. So although I say essay, I also put the word report here. I gave a word count just to give you a general idea about how big it is, but again, that's open-ended. But just that idea again that to just summarize what you've learned. Now, yes, it can be written, but you can also include code, you can draw some diagrams, you can include pictures. And then to help sort of structure it further, I basically created a list of essentially questions you could answer. Like you can see here. Like if you're wondering, well, what should I summarize? Well, tell me what a variable is. Tell me what types there are. How do you create one? How do you use it? What's the scope? What's a constant? And go through that list kind of through to the end where there's just some general computer science summaries, how you can use it to create stuff. What about your career choices in computer science? So there's plenty of things that you can talk about in summarizing it if you do not wish to do a formal final project. Okay? Please email me if you have any questions about that, but I wanted to put into this video today just that summary sort of response there. And now I'm going to put that aside and focus on what I'm really excited about is doing some programming extras. So a whole folder full of stuff on this that is linked on the website. And if you click on that folder link, it's going to open this folder right here on my online content. And in this folder is a bunch of stuff from the past as well. So a bunch of notes, some different examples, some ones that have specifically been asked by students over the years. So there's that stuff. There's also a document which summarizes all of them. So kind of what I'm going to be going through today. If you want to go through it at a different pace, you can go through this document sort of step by step, and it essentially does the same thing I'm going to do in the video today. It's the same basic idea. And as well, right here, you'll actually see links to the actual code from an online source. So for example, here's one of the ones we're going to be doing. You'll see in a few minutes when we get to this point, that this code here that we're going to type in is available for you online. So as I've mentioned maybe a couple weeks ago, all the examples for the whole course are available through this website called GitHub, which is a code storage or code repository of all the examples I do in class. This code repository idea, by the way, is something that I definitely expand on in grade 11 and grade 12 computer science. All right, so there's all the resources. Okay, let's get started. So what we're going to start with is just a basic project with a basic form. We're going to have our toolbox open. We're going to have our properties window open. And we're going to start with some design stuff. So I'm going to start by just putting a label on here, very simple thing. And I'm going to change the text of that label to just say, welcome to Media Player. That's what we're going to make today. Something that plays media. And by media, I mean video and sounds. Okay, welcome to the Media Player. Very simple thing. I'm going to pick a font and a size that I like. It can be any font, any size. So I'm going to make it look kind of nice. And there we go. It's a little big. So one of the things that we've learned a little bit in this course is there's this feature auto size, which I'm going to set to false, which allows me to kind of stretch it out. And a little bigger. And in addition, I'm also going to use this one text align to stick it in the center here. So this is stuff we've kind of learned in other sort of demos, but there's my welcome to the media player. Okay, you can pick whatever font and whatever color and whatever size, etc., that you'd like. But I'm also now going to take the form itself, change its startup position so it starts in the center of the screen. We'll start in the center. Under form border style, I'm going to say none. So it's going to be a borderless form. This is essentially going to be a little welcome splash screen. So it's going to appear like that. Now I'm just going to run it once just so you can see. I'll have to stop it using Visual Studio, but you'll get the idea. It doesn't have any buttons or anything on it. It's just going to display like a little sign up for the users so they can see this thing just like that. So there it is, just up like that. And that's what it's going to do. Okay, so I'm going to hit stop. All right, since this is called Programming Extras, the first extra that we're going to learn about is a thing called a timer, okay? Now, if you're looking through the list of common controls, you won't see timer in here. It's not as common. If you switch from common to all the Windows forms or search for it, for a timer, it will appear there, okay? And it does not matter where you drag and drop the timer because it won't actually appear on the form. Instead, it appears down here at the bottom of the form because it's not a visual, it's not something you see. Timers aren't things you see on a form, they're things that do stuff. And a way to describe a timer is essentially it's like a loop. It'll keep repeating its code over and over again. It has very few properties, as you can see. Some of these properties, like generate member and modifiers and tag, they're nothing that we need to worry about. We don't need to worry about them at all. We do need to give our timer a name. Enabled is important because as long as the timer is enabled, it'll keep running. So like a loop, it'll keep looping while something's true. So it starts off disabled or false. We can change that to true, and we can also use code to change it from true to false, to turn timers on and off. And then lastly, and this is perhaps the most important thing, is this thing called the interval. Intervals is actual time. Like it actually, instead of the loop, which goes as fast as the loop can run on a particular computer, intervals are measured in milliseconds. Okay? Milliseconds is a different unit of time than you're used to. There are 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second of real time. So it'll take 1,000 milliseconds for 1 second of real time to go over. So that 100 right there is 1/10 of a second. So it'll say every 1/10 of a second, run whatever code I need to run. Okay, so let's start by changing the name of this timer. And I'm also going to enable it. So what I'm going to do is name this timer. I'm just going to use the 3-letter extension TMR. You could use TIM, that's a good one too. Whatever you'd like. And this timer's job is to change some colors. So that's what I'm going to call it, TMR colors. I'm going to enable that timer. And you know what? I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add a 0 here. Just type that in. So this timer will run every 1,000 milliseconds, which is really 1 second of real time. So every 1 second, this timer will run. Well, what will it run? What code does this timer run? Well, you have to give it the code, just like you'd give a button a code. I'm going to double click this timer, and now I can go in and actually write code for when this timer, and the code they use here says whenever it ticks. So this would be every 1 second. So every 1 second, which is really 1,000 milliseconds. So every 1 second it says, okay, tell me what code I should run right here. Okay, so every 1 second, what should I do? All right, so let's do something. Let's make a random equals new random. Let's make an integer r. It's going to represent, well, actually, let's flesh it right out. Red, the amount of red is random.next, a random number between 0, which means no red at all, to a maximum number is actually 255, and we always go 1 over to 256 possible red combinations. So between very little red to the most possible red, 255 would be the highest number. copying and pasting that line 2 more times. I'm also going to make some green and some blue. Now these are just integers. They're just numbers. A certain number to represent how much of that color. Okay? And that color, and the nice thing is I can do that randomly. So it's not a predefined color. It's a random color. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this. This refers to the form itself. Dot back color. And back color was something we dealt with in the end of the looping unit, just as we started to look at these sort of graphical extras. And I'm going to say capital C color with a American spelling. There's no U there, just C-O-L-O-R. Also, a capital C is really important here, okay, because it's not code we're going to create. Dot from ARGB, red, green. Okay, let me back up a bit. This is just some code that's built in, but I want to basically explain what it does. It says, I want to create a color from a bunch of red, green, and blue values. From a red, green, and blue value. That's what essentially that means. And what I've then done is given it those 3 values. Here's the red, here's the green, here's the blue, and all 3 of those are random numbers. It's going to do this every 1 second. So let me start this and show you what happens. So every 1 second, a random color is generated. Cool. Okay. Now, let's tweak it a little bit. This only works because of a timer we created, which is running every 1 second. So if I had this set back to false, the timer wouldn't run at all, and you wouldn't have seen the changes. But what I'm going to tweak is the interval. That's every 1 second. If I change this to 500, that's every half a second. So now it's going to change the color every half a second. Okay, so it's a little faster, right? I could slow it down by increasing the number. And you might be wondering, well, how fast could it go? Like if I went all the way down to 1, that's every 1,000th of a second. Would it work? Yes, it will. Unfortunately, it's going to look really bad, and I'm going to warn you, it's going to be very flashy. It's going to be very jittery on the screen right now. But it happens so quickly, it's hard for the human eye to process the colors that are changing. So it's not really a practical thing to set it to be that fast. You're not really going to see it. So what you want to do is find a number that essentially works. So I'm going to just put it back to 100, which is every 10th of a second. Let's see how that looks. That might be a little quick. Yeah, it's a little quick, but I kind of like that. It's very, kind of grabs your, at least you can see the colors that are being processed there every 10th of a second. All right, so that's the basics of using timers. They're really not that hard to use. They only have a few properties to deal with, but then you add code to them and they become all of a sudden very powerful. It's good to already know about loops because essentially timers work like loops. So by learning loops, you've essentially learned the basics of timers. But timers work on time, right? Remember, this is a measurement of actual time, whereas loops just run as fast as the computer can work them. So on a really fast computer, loops will run faster than on a really slow computer. So timers are good for things like building projects that you want to control the speed of something. Like in our rocket racing game, we couldn't really control the speed that well. Using a timer, we certainly could. So if you wanted a timer to stop, all you would want to do is set this to false, which we're about to do again in a second now. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second timer. Because you can add as many timers as you like. They each run independent of one another. So now I have 2 timers. They both run at the same time. They don't interfere with one another. So what I'm going to use this timer for is I'm going to have it wait 3 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever I decide, and then shut down the program. Okay? So I'm going to call this one, so I'm going to go in and change the name of this. I'm just going to call it change because I'm actually not going to keep it shutting down the program. Okay, so Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to name it TMR change. It's a timer to change things. It is enabled, and I'm setting it for 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds. It's going to wait 1, 2, 3 seconds, and then run its code. Here's what the code's going to be. Well, what I'm going to do is shut itself off. So it waits 3 seconds and then shuts itself off. So if you ever want a timer to stop using code, you would just do this. Say, you know what? I'm done with you. Shut yourself off. So the timer would no longer wait 3 seconds anymore. Okay? It would just be off. But now what I'm going to do, which is going to be a little, actually, let me just, I'm going to say shut down the application, which we already know how to do. Application. I'm not going to keep this code, so if you're following along with me, I wouldn't type this part in. I'm just going to use this to demo it. So let's see if it waits 3 seconds and then shuts down. So the colors are going to start changing. But then let's count it. 1, 2, 3, and off it goes. Okay? If I wanted it a little bit longer, I could go in, change the properties, change the interval. And by the way, you can also change the interval using code if you want. You could have the code speed up a timer or slow down a timer by actually going in and saying .interval equals and changing it if you wanted to. Anyways, now instead of shutting down, what I'm going to do is switch to another form. And this is the next new thing I wanted to teach you about, is from this point, from the whole course, every time we built a project, it would involve one form. You design it, all your code would go into it, and you'd be done with that assignment. But that's not the way Visual Studio can work. You can have multiple forms for one project. So that's what we're about to do, is to do exactly that. Here's how. If you go to Project up here in the menu screen, you can see right at the very top, you can add a form to your project, which I'm going to now do. Add form. Okay, you can see here, by default, it's set to a form. Be careful, there are other things you can add that are a lot more complicated, but it's just a form that we're going to add to our, that was what was there. It also gives it a name down here. Okay, this is again where maybe you want to start thinking about naming your forms. That might be a better way to go about things, but I'm just going to keep it form 2 for now. And sure enough, now you can see in our Solution Explorer, the 2 forms are now there. As well, each one will have its own little tab that you can open or close, right? So if I don't need form 1 anymore, I can close those tabs. If I decide I need form 1 back, now this thing called the Solution Explorer is useful to you. We saw this at the very beginning of the course, and I said you won't really need this, so I did say exit out, but now there's a time where maybe you want to actually use the Solution Explorer and maybe pin it down, because it could be something you could use, just like properties is something you could use. Okay, so this is now an option that you could use, is to have the Solution Explorer open. So if you accidentally close a tab, you could double click it to get it back. You can also do this through menus like the View menu up here or the Window menu up here. Like if you're like, where did my Solution Explorer go? You can go to Window and you can reset all the windows. So under Window, reset the window layout. You can also, under the View menu, find the Solution Explorer right there. So this is ways you can start to get a little more powerful with Visual Studio if you need to. All right, so back to form 1. The timer to change runs. It's waited 3 seconds. It's turned itself off. Let me add some comments. Wow, my code is messed up. Turns itself off, which is what it did. Okay. Now, to switch to another form, that form being form 2, this is the kind of code you're going to want to write to be able to do that. Okay. All right. Capital F, form 2, form 2 equals new form 2, bracket, bracket, semicolon. Okay, this line might look familiar to you because it will look very much like this line. Random, random equals new random. Now, I taught that to you for a reason. It's easy to remember it this way. It's harder to remember that you had to use a capital R here and a lowercase r here, and then another capital R here, and then don't forget to put 2 brackets at the end here, along with the word new. But now that you've been doing this for a while, hopefully it's getting a little more used to it. Because now, to change to form 2, we use the exact same format. Form 2, lowercase f, form 2, equals new, form 2, 2 brackets, and the word new. Okay? Just so you know, though, this word doesn't really matter. Okay? I did that to kind of build that in you, but you could have called it X or Y or potato. It doesn't really matter. But this gives you a way to kind of be used to the code in that format. Now, we're not done yet. The next thing is we have to make that new form appear. Okay? Because this first line, what it did was it created a new form. A new form 2. It creates it. Now we have to make that new form appear by saying form 2 dot, and the word is, believe it or not, show. Show me that new form. So this line creates it, this line makes it appear. Let me show you. So after 3 seconds, it should make the new form appear. And there it is. So here's our new form 2, 3 seconds later. Now, I want to show you why turning the timer off was important. If I had not turned the timer off, something interesting happens. It waits 3 seconds, makes a form 2, there it is, but then it waits another 3 seconds and makes another one. And then it waits 3 seconds and makes another one. Now imagine, this is something you don't have to imagine because I'm going to do it. If I had the timer to change, what if its interval was like every half a second? Every half a second, it did this. Well, what you're going to get is this. Every half a second, it's going to start making a new form 2, which is kind of neat, almost virus-like how it does this. But that's not what we wanted at all. And one more thing, notice that form 1 is still around. It didn't go away. It's still running as well with its own timer. So this is a weird sort of scenario that we don't want to get into. I'll put that back to 3 seconds. Go back to my code. Make sure I turn the timer off so it only runs once. So it only waits 3 seconds, makes a form 2 appear. But then I'm going to do some other thing. I'm going to make the current form disappear. Because I don't want to see that form anymore. I can't say form 1. That's not how it works. Instead, again, I use the word, this. This dot, and the opposite of showing something is hiding something. So the people who wrote the code for Visual Studio that did this stuff made some nice words to make this stuff happen. Show and hide. Show my new form, hide this form. Okay? Remember, you're going to have to put those round brackets there. There's a reason for that. Okay, so let's now see if it's in a better state. So the nice splash screen appears, waits 3 seconds, and then moves on to form 2. And now notice form 1 is hidden. I don't need to see it anymore. All right. So with that little piece of programming extras, and we're not done yet, but we've already learned about timers, which are really powerful, and now multiple forms. And this is just 2 forms. I hope to add a 3rd form before this example's over. But let's now focus on form 2. I'm kind of done with form 1, so I'm going to close those tabs. If I needed them back, I could double click and view the code, get them back, just like that. But I am done with them, so I'm just going to go like that. And now I'm going to build onto form 2. using my toolbox. Okay, taking a pause there for a second. Let's build our Form 2. And what I want to add to Form 2 is a bunch of buttons. Okay, since this is going to be our actual media player, I'm going to put a few buttons on here. Before I do that, I'm going to change the text at the top to media player. I'm going to change the form border style, not to none, but to just something as simple as a simple tool window like this. So I don't have to worry about icons and minimize, maximize buttons. Just going to keep it a simple tool window. That's under the form border style. I'm also going to have it start position in the center of the screen. So these couple little changes are just cosmetic changes to make it look a little nicer. So now I'm just going to test that before I go and put a bunch of buttons on here. So my opening splash screen, really easy to do, and away we go. I'm just going to jump back to the splash screen for a second. With the splash screen on Form 1, you are already incorporating 2 extras with multiple forms and timers. Timers are essentially like loops, and we also used variables. So we've already done a ton of stuff that incorporated how much you've learned in this course, right? Here's a random number generator, okay? Here is 3 random color values, and values means they're numbers, okay? Red, green, and blue, okay? What did this line do down here? It sets those colors, or sets, how about that color, to the form's background. That's what it does, okay? So our timer ran and did that. Then our other timer came, created a Form 2, made that new form appear, made the current form disappear. It's some pretty solid code that doesn't, I mean, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines of code with a little bit of design, made something kind of cool that can work on essentially any program. Okay, but now we're on to Form 2. So we're going to need some buttons, okay? The first button we're going to do is going to change the text, play a selected sound file. So it's going to find a sound file and play it. Okay, we'll deal with how it's going to do that in a minute. Whatever sound file the user selects, it's going to play that. Copy, paste. The next button I'm going to do is going to play a selected video file. So I'm going to allow this one to play a video. Okay. The next button is going to show the player, and the next button is going to hide the player. If I'm playing the sound, I don't need to see what I'm playing it. Okay, you'll get this in a minute when we kind of get the player up there. And then I'm going to have 2 more buttons that show and hide the controls for this player. So I can show the whole player, or I can show or hide just the controls. And again, this will make a lot more sense once we get into this. And finally, one more button just to exit. Oops, 2 buttons. Just 1 button, which is going to be my exit button. All right. So here's the buttons again I'm going to have. Play a selected sound, play a selected video, show the player, hide the player, show the controls or hide the controls, and exit. I'm not even going to bother naming these buttons. They're going to be so simple that I'm just going to keep them as is. But what's next is I want to add something right here from my toolbox that actually isn't in the toolbox. Okay, what I'm doing right now, you probably already knew you could do. With the toolbox, there's these little triangles. If they're sort of pointing down and filled in, then it's showing the tools right there, right? Like that's what happens when you have common controls, the tools are down. If they're pointing directly to the right and it's empty, it's essentially collapsed those tools. But what I'm going to do is add a tool to the toolbox. I'm going to add a tool onto here by going down here to the bottom where it says General and right-clicking on it. Right-clicking and going to choose an item to put into the toolbox. Notice as well you could reset the toolbox if you ever made a big mistake with it. But I'm going to choose an item. This will bring up this little dialog window. It'll take a minute to load everything. And here's a whole bunch of stuff I can add. Most of it is way too complicated, but I'm going to go to this tab right here that says COM components, C-O-M. Again, because there's so many things, it takes a minute to process. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this list. So COM components, bottom of the list. And right third from the bottom is a version of the Windows Media Player that I'm going to check off. And then click OK. It will now get added to my toolbox down here. And now I can use it to draw or drag and drop, either way, a version of the Windows Media Player right into my program. And as you know, Windows Media Player can play sounds and videos. So it's going to do most of the work for us. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. But we also have one other thing to add. Oh, someone has a question.
That step.
Hello?
Could you repeat that step with the media player?
Yep. I'll go back over again. So I'm just going to reset the toolbox right here. That just puts things back to default settings in Visual Studio. So the way to put things in the toolbox is to right-click with the right mouse button on the word General. After you've right-clicked, you're going to go to Choose Items. Now, this will take a second for this all to load. This dialog box will appear. It takes a minute to load. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs along the top. What we want is we're going to go to this second tab here, the one that says COM components. Okay, these other ones are cool too, but for this demo, I obviously I don't know them all, and I'm not going to go through them all. So under COM components or COM components, okay. Now what I want you to do is scroll this thing right down to the bottom. So go right to the bottom of this list. Okay. So under COM components, right at the bottom of the list, you will find third from the bottom, Windows Media Player. And that's what you're going to check off. You're just going to click on that little box to check off Windows Media Player, and then click OK. After a moment, it will now add that over here under General as a new tool for your toolbox that wasn't there before. Okay. Now you can still go back to your other tools like buttons and stuff like that. But now this Windows Media Player is there, and you can either drag and drop it right onto your design, or you can click on the tool and click and drag it just like you would any other tool. And that's how you add a version of a Windows Media Player right into any design you want. And media players can play videos and they can play sounds. So they're really cool if you're making like a game. You can have it play all the sounds in your game. You can add multiple media players. You can combine them with the timers. You could have it play a video, which could be like a cutscene kind of thing. You can make things full screen. It's got a lot of power using a tool that already does most of the work for you. All right. So now that we have the media player, we're going to need one other thing, one other kind of advanced thing. In order to play a selected file, we're going to have the user pick the file. And normally when you do that, like if you're in Microsoft Word and you want to open a Word file, okay, let me demonstrate as such. If I'm in Microsoft Word and I want to work on, say, an essay that I've been working on, I want to, print my selected essay, I have to open that essay. I have to tell the program Microsoft Word, well, which essay am I going to print? And to do that, I would click a button like Open. And then you normally, when you're opening something in Microsoft Word or other types of programs, we'll see a dialog box that looks something like this, where the user can go through and pick what file they want to open. It'll show up down here. And then they can click Open. Well, we're going to essentially do that. To do this in Visual Studio, they've made it really easy. Whoops. By adding to this, and this we don't have to add. It's not something that isn't common, but it is under all Windows forms. Okay. And what it is, you may remember in our last unit, we had that color dialog box, which made colors being able to choose. What we want now is the open file dialog box. So you'll find this under the toolbox. You can either search for it, open file dialog, or if you can't find it there, just go to all Windows forms and you'll find it under there, open file dialog. It doesn't matter where you put it, because like timers, it appears at the bottom. It's not something that we need to worry about where it goes on your design. Okay, that will complete our design. We're not going to bother naming stuff. We're going to be lazy today and just use the names that are there to make this work. Okay, so here's where we're at. We click play. Our nice little splash screen appears with the color changing, waits 3 seconds after this beautiful little intro, loads up our media player. Okay, that's weird. Okay, not sure why that's doing that. Let's do some easy ones first. Let's code our exit button. So our exit button, application.exit. We already knew how to do that. Okay. I'm not sure why mine is. I'm just going to stretch my note a little bit. I did notice this happened earlier. This is a weird little quirk in Visual Studio. Waits 3 seconds and up we go. And now I can exit. Okay. That's weird. Make this a little wider still. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to code this first button to play the selected sound. And again, I didn't bother naming it, so mine's just called button 1. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need to do, and I'm going to start closing some of these windows so I can make the code bigger. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need to do is display the dialog for the user. To do that, I say open file dialog 1 dot, okay, and it's show dialog, bracket, bracket, semicolon. So it's kind of, again, you're going to see very similar code the way this works. Let me show you. So 3 seconds. I click this, and this appears. Okay, so it's making an open file dialog thing appear right there. Really good. Okay. Then what I'm going to do with that, okay, is I'm going to use what they selected. So the user is obviously going to select something and load it into the media player or into the Windows media player. So I have that Windows media player sitting on my form. So here's, I can do this all in one step. The name of the media player, you can go and look if you want. It came up with a weird name for it under properties. Called it AX Media Player. Anyways, I just know it starts with AX, media player 1, dot URL, believe it or not, is the thing we're going to use. I know normally you think of this for websites, URL, but URL actually, although it's most commonly used with websites, really just stands for Universal Resource Locator. So it's just a universal way to locate a resource. And in this case, the resource will be a sound or a video or whatever. So it's a very general term, although we tend to associate it with websites. But anyways, equals open file dialog 1 dot file name. So this is pretty self-explanatory in a lot of ways. This code, if you think about it, is not really that difficult. Take the name of the file that the user put in from that dialog box and load it as a resource into the media player. So this almost in a lot of ways goes all the way back to our very first unit. Here's the object, dot, here's the property, equals something new right here with the semicolon at the end. You might remember that all the way back from our first programming, one of our first programming units. And here I'm using a dot to say, well, the file name from the dialog. So all that code's coming back a little bit. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually play it. This is some weird code, but AX media player 1 dot control controls. I don't know why they named it that, but they did. They put C control controls. I don't know why they didn't just say controls. I didn't make it, so you can't blame me. Dot play. Bracket, bracket, semicolon. Oops, it's not a semicolon. That's a semicolon. Okay. So this is the name of our media player, and I'm saying go into the controls and play them. The reason that we generally have those round brackets is whenever there's an action involved. Okay, this is expanded on in a lot more detail in the Computer Science 30S course, but those round brackets essentially imply that an action of playing something is taking place. Again, I don't want to overthink it. That's not really part of this course. So, okay, that's it. It's really only those 3 lines of code. In order for me to test this code, I'm going to actually need a sound file for this to work. So I'm going to take a second here and go on the internet and finds me a sound file. Free sound files. Let's see. Let's try this one. Is this website going to work? I don't want one of those ones where I have to make a profile for all that stuff. So this one, I think this one, no, this one I know makes you make a profile. How about Sound Bible? Let's try that one. I think this one will work. Okay. Airplane landing. Sound. Wave or MP3? I'm just going to go with wave. Good. It's downloading. So it's downloading this file right now. Show in folder. And I'm just going to drop it on my desktop to keep things simple. So I'm going to put that file right on my desktop just so I know where it is. I'm not going to bother renaming it. That's the sound file, a wave file. I'm going to do one more just for kicks. Alien spaceship, UFO. That sounds cool. And what am I getting an ad here? Let's try this again. Do I really need to add? Oh, here it is. Okay, MP3 this time. Let me download the MP3, show it in the folder, put it on my desktop. Okay, so I got 2 sound files on my desktop. That'll work. All right, let's test this. So, oh, we have a bug here. Is it crashing? Nope. Okay, 3 seconds later, here comes this thing. Open the selected file or play the selected file. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to pick the airplane landing, and let the media player do its job. Looks like it's working. Let's try the other one. Let's try the MP3. And you see I also have the controls right here of the media player itself that I can work with if I need to. All right, so that worked out really well, okay? I'm gonna add one more line to this though, to make it a little more interesting. Okay, and I'm gonna do this line at the top of the button. I'm gonna filter out all files but sound files. Because that might be important. You may have noticed when I went to open that sound file, I could have picked a Microsoft Word file. And that you can't play that. I can't filter out other files that aren't media player files. Why is, oh yeah, it's still running. So to do that, I'm going to say open file dialog 1 dot filter equals, and there's a certain format for the way you write this. So I'm going to put the words sound files and then a vertical line, that straight up line right there, and then star.wav. Okay, so this is what I've done right here. Okay, that vertical line separates two parts to this. And I'll show you what that does in a second. Okay. This again is just a little bit extras. You can also find this stuff by a quick Google search on how to use like the open file dialog in Visual Studio. But now you notice I have a WAV file and an MP3. When I go to play the selected file, and I go now to my desktop, come on desktop, there we go. Notice now only the WAV file shows here. The MP3 no longer shows up here. And if I go into other folders, right, it's not going to show me files that aren't MP3 files, or pardon me, WAV files. So I'm going to click open. It still works, but it filtered out those other files. Okay. Now, to do the next button, I'm going to take all this code that I just typed, go to the play video file, paste it in, get rid of the comments. What am I pressing here? And just go down to just the code itself, these 4 lines. So this plays the sound files. For this, I'm going to change it to video files. And the rest of this will be the same. Now, for this to work, I'm going to need a video file. So I'm going to go to, I don't know, YouTube. And we'll grab what's popular on YouTube. This is always a scary way to demonstrate something in class. Who knows what's popular on YouTube right now? Could be any number of crazy things. All right, some weird stuff here. Well, let's use this robot demo. This looks kind of cool. So this thing here.
If you're a YouTuber, you're probably using this and this. So you should start using this.
Okay, so that's the video. How can I get this video? I can't play it off the internet. So I'm going to use a little website to download. There's lots of these little video websites where you can download YouTube videos. So I'm going to grab the website URL. I'm going to put it in here. And this is just, you can get videos all kinds of ways. You don't have to use this format. Download. It's full of ads. Come on. Download. Come on. There we go. So I'll just get a simple version and download it. Here we go. Come on.
Hey guys, you're about to watch another spot video, but before you did, I needed to make a couple of announcements to make some things clear. The reason you see us all hanging out.
Okay, hopefully that's saving to my desktop right now. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. Woo! So like if you recorded your own video, then you could just take that video file and put it somewhere. So mine's downloading to my desktop right now. But what's important is I now learned this. MP4 is the extension after the dot for this type of video file. So I'm going to add that to my filter. So that video files will end in MP4. That's what this filtering part does. This is what's called the file extension. So just like .wav was the extension for sound files that I was filtering, .mp4 is going to be the extension for video files. What this star means is what's called a wildcard. It means that the front part of this can be anything. It doesn't matter what the front part is, as long as the back part of it, this is actually known as the last name of the file, is MP4.
Swag?
Yes.
It froze on the
Froze.
yeah
The
on Google.
Okay, I'm going to stop it. Okay, I'm just recording the back part of this class video because someone told me the screen had froze, so I'm just jumping in. So right when the video froze, as you saw, we went on this website and got some free sound effects. We got the airport landing sound and we got the alien UFO, and we ended up downloading those to the desktop. And then we went to YouTube, and we from the YouTube front page, we grabbed this quick video from the guy from Mythbusters, and we used one of many possible video downloading sites to get off YouTube. They're all kind of weird and stuff, but we ended up doing that. We got the video and we were able to download it and right click and save the video as. So sitting on the desktop right now is two sound files. One's a WAV file, WAV, that's one type of sound file, and one's a MP3 file, a different type of sound file. And each of these are different types of sound files, right? And whenever now you're going to be using media like sounds, you're going to have these different formats. This is true for pictures as well. There's JPEG, there's GIF, there's others. And now we also have a video file that ends in MP4. These are what are called the file's extensions. So you have the first part of the file, which is the name of it, and then a dot, and then one of these extensions at the end of it. This is how the computer knows that this is a video file, this is a sound file, this is a different type of sound file. So there's that. So anyways, we're going to incorporate that into the coding we did. So just a quick refresher. From our media player, which had two timer objects, the two timer objects each have really neat properties, whether they're enabled and the interval that they can use. The code for that first form, use the timer to generate random numbers, 3 random numbers for red, green, and blue. Those 3 numbers, red, green, and blue, are then used with this little piece of code here to assign it to the background color of the form. And then the second timer, 1, turns itself off. So this timer only runs once for 3 seconds and then shuts off. Creates a second form, shows that form, and makes this, the current form, disappear. So it switches from one form to the next. That second form now is a media player form where we modified the toolbox of Visual Studio's toolbox area to add a media player onto the toolbox, which we then added to our design. We then went and coded, for example, this first button to do the following. The first button shows a dialog box that opens a file. We then filtered out just sound files, specifically the .wav. And this little star right here is what's called a wildcard. It means the first part doesn't matter as long as it ends with WAV. And then we took that file name from the opening file dialog box, put it into the media player into what's called the URL of that media player. And then we took the media player, went to the controls, and called upon it to play that sound file. Okay? And now, switching this over to video, we can essentially use the exact same code. It's the exact same 4 lines of code. The only part that changes is the way we filter it. Now we're going to filter out only video files, and obviously we're going to change that back part instead of WAV to MP4. So let's try this. So here's our splash screen with the 3-second timer before it switches to the second screen. You'll also notice that it used that other timer to change the appearance by changing the colors. Now I'm going to play a selected file. This is that opening file dialog box that appears. It is filtered out all but WAV files. So you notice this is the only file that's showing, even though on my desktop I have an MP3 file and I have a video file. It's only filtered out just the WAV file. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to open it. Play that file. I still have my controls here, so I can turn it up and down and stop it if I need to. Now I'm going to play a selected video file. Oops. You notice with this, it's now filtering video files that end in MP4. So only the MP4 files are showing. Select it, open it.
Adam Savage from Tested here in the Tested offices.
A video file, and I still have my controls here.
And it's the hot
I would normally use a media player using those controls. Okay. The next thing now we're going to do is we're going to code these two buttons to show and hide this player right here. Okay. Now, when we're playing sound files, we don't need to see the player. So again, if you're making a game, you may want to have it play really cool sounds, but you don't want to see that player. Like, let's play a file so you can know what I'm talking about, right? See this happening on the screen when you're playing the game. So it'd be good if we could hide that player so you can't see that. So, whoops. Let's okay, so on Form 2, to hide the player, all I have to do is make that media player visible false. And subsequently, to make it reappear, I just say media player.visible true. So it's as simple as that. It's simple code we already knew how to do, which is to make things true and false. Okay? So even before I load in a file, if I just say hide the player, show the player, right? So if I hide the player and still play a sound file, you'll still be able to hear the sound file, even though the player isn't shown. Show it. Still playing. Okay, and then to show and hide the controls of this thing, this is a slightly different piece of code. With this piece of code, you say media player.UI mode. UI stands for user interface, and this is code that's already built in. And in quotes, you put the word full, which means a full set of user interface. And then for the one that says hide controls, I just say UI mode equals none. And let me show you what that looks like. So here's our opening splash screen. Timer sets to here. I'm going to play a video file. So I know this video file is ready to go. It's going to start.
Adam Savage from Tested here in the
I'm
Tested
going to
offices.
hide the controls. So
and it's the holiday season in San
gone.
Francisco as I'm talking to you
Or I can
right
show
now.
them.
It's early December, but Christmas has
You
come
can still hide and
early,
show the player as
and
well.
I'm sitting on the best
Now you can see a video's playing right inside my program.
This.
So that's a really nice feature there. All right. To wrap up the rest of this thing, what we're going to then do is we're going to add a third form to this project. So instead of just being 2 forms, now I'm going to have 3 forms. So now let's take a look at Form 3. All I did with Form 3 was I added 1 label, put the word buy in it, and then I also changed my form so that it starts in the center screen and that the border style, the form border style, again, like the first form, has no border. I've also added a timer to Form 3. In that timer, I've set it to be enabled, so it's running, and it's set for 5 seconds. So 5 seconds, and then this timer will so it only runs for 5 seconds. Okay, so that's our Form 3. Jump back to form 2 for a second. I then coded the exit button now to switch to that form using the code we did back in form 1. So now I'm going to go form 3 equals new form 3, and then show form 3. Now I want to hide this form. This form will now be form 2 that's getting hidden. All right, so now when I hit that button, it's going to jump to form 3 instead of form 2. All right, so what's the code I'm going to put into form 3? Well, for the timer, it's pretty simple. All the timer is going to do is after those 5 seconds, it shuts everything down. So application.exit shuts every single form down. That's one nice thing about application.exit. It shuts every form down, okay? But then what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to go into the form load code of form 3, and I'm going to put the following code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a sound without using a media player, just using code. So this is the last thing I wanted to show, which was to create a path to that file, which is on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our sound effects, and I'm going to grab this service bell sound file, and I'm going to grab the wave file, and I'm going to download that. I'm going to put that on my desktop. So this service bell goes there. Okay. Now, in order to play this without a media player, this sound file right here, I need to know what it's called. I can see the name of it right here. I know it ends in .wav, but I actually need a little more information than just that. So what I'm going to do is right-click and go to Properties of this particular sound file. Because in the properties, I can get a lot of information. One, I can get that name again. And I can actually select that right out of the properties, right-click, and copy it. But in addition, there's also this thing that says location right here, which is really useful. And similarly, I can select that, right-click, and I can copy that as well. So I'm going to do that in 2 parts. I'm going to copy it, make a string variable called path, paste that there, so there's the path to it, and I'm going to add 2 slashes at the end. You'll notice when you paste it in, it only puts 1 slash. When you put this into code, you have to turn 1 slash into 2 slashes. Okay, then I'm going to also copy the name of that file. There it is right there. But I'm going to say that the name of this file equals the path plus that. So it puts both of these pieces together into something called file name. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a line of code to create a media sound player using just code. So it's not a design trick, it's just using code. System.media.soundPlayer equals new system.media.soundPlayer, bracket, bracket. Then I will load in the sound file by saying player, that's the name I gave it right here, sound location equals file name. File name is what I created up here, which is these 2 pieces put together. That's what it is. So it gets me to that file. And then finally, I just play it by saying player.play. So when the form loads for the 3rd form, it will automatically play that file. That's the idea. Let's see if it works. So I still have my media player that I can play sounds normally, but now when I hit exit, it jumps to that 3rd form and it played that sound without me using a media player at all. And that's it. That's it for this week. I'm going to put this piece together with the other piece and have that up on my website. See you guys next week.